Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Automation Alley's virtual tech takeover. I'm Seta Sykes, Automation Alley's engagement manager. This tech takeover is brought to you by one of our foundation members, Manpower Group. Manpower Group provides administrative and support services, professional services, and business services through its four primary brands: Manpower, contingent staffing and permanent recruitment; Express, professional resourcing and project-based solutions; Right Management, career management, workforce consulting and training and development; and Manpower Group Solutions, managed services and outsourcing. If you have any questions regarding Manpower or any of their services, I'd be more than happy to connect you with a representative. Information can also be found on the Tech Takeover information page. Most Wednesdays, we host these member-led Industry 4.0 focused sessions via live stream. This week's topic is cyber compliance made simple and affordable with NUDG systems. I'm pleased to be joined by our speaker this morning, Veronica Baginski. She's the Sales and Marketing Director for NUDG Systems. And also a quick reminder, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to answer questions or ask questions. And if we run out of time to answer them today, we will get that answer to the correct person and have the question answered for you. Thank you. And I'd like to now welcome our panelists. Veronica.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Very excited to be here today. And my contact information is going to be listed in the presentation. So if people come up with questions later, please feel free to reach out to me. And right now I'm going to share my screen so we can get started on the presentation. Okay. So this is a presentation about cybersecurity in general, cybersecurity demystified, understanding what you really need to be focusing on with your team, and some talking points to talk to your leadership about. So I'm Veronica Baginski. I'm the Sales and Marketing Director for NUDG Systems, and my contact information is listed here. But just to give you a quick overview of kind of how we got started and where we came from, I started working for a company called MetalOps. And MetalOps is a program management and engineering company. Oh, did the screen change? There it goes. Okay. MetalOps is a program management and engineering company. And back in 2017, we received the word, as most people did, that you had to be NIST compliant if you had a contract with the NIST language in it. And we had to become compliant before the 2017 deadline. So we worked with multiple entities. We went to multiple webinars, events, functions, worked with people in the industry that we knew who might be knowledgeable about this topic. And my boss, Katie, was going through lots of different ways to get to compliance, to figure out the most effective solution. And what we realized is that there's really no comprehensive tool out in the market today that can support small to mid-sized businesses, particularly ones who have a budget. So her husband, Mark, he started a company called Pacesetter Operations Group. And with an IT team, they developed NUDG. So what is NUDG? NUDG is a program management tool to help you attain and maintain both NIST and CMMC compliance. And you can document all the components you need to pass an audit. But today is about education in NIST and CMMC. So if you have questions about NUDG, I'm more than happy to discuss those with you and show demos to your team or to leadership. But today, really want to focus on the actual components of cybersecurity and what you should be looking for. So just a simple agenda. So we're going to review NIST and what it is, different compliance components, expectations, and the same thing for CMMC. Then we're going to compare the two so there's no confusion about where the differences are, and then review what you should be doing today for compliance, what clauses you should be looking for in your contracts, and some next steps for you and your leadership team. But just a couple things to keep in mind. Cybersecurity, this isn't optional. There's this misconception in the marketplace that, oh, this doesn't pertain to me. Oh, I don't need to do this. Oh, no one's going to follow up with me. Cybersecurity is not optional. There are audit teams out there who are auditing companies today. And cybersecurity needs to be a part of your culture. It needs to be something that is ingrained from the CEO all the way down to the average employee in the company. If one person is not following the policies set up by the company, the cybersecurity plan really is kind of a moot point. It's not something that's fully encompassed within your organization. And this isn't about checklists or checking a box. Like, yeah, I have to log into my VPN to access my email. Yeah, I have to do double factor authentication on my phone or on my tablet, but I don't have it on my phone. This isn't about just kind of getting around what you need to get around to satisfy the bare minimum. Cybersecurity affects everyone. It affects the average citizen. Taxpayer dollars are being stolen, upwards of $6 billion a year by foreign entities. So this is something that pertains to every American citizen, and you as a business owner or an employee for a defense contractor should take it seriously so that you guys aren't at risk for anything that might befall you. And cybersecurity is here to stay. This isn't something that's going away. There was a lot of talk when President Biden came into office that there was going to be some changes, and it's not. He has made this his second priority after the COVID vaccinations. He has dedicated over $650 million in the COVID relief bill. They just put over $25 million into the DHS for grant money to help small businesses get to compliance. So this isn't something that, oh, it's going to evolve so much, it's going to change, I don't need to worry about it, I'll just keep waiting and waiting and waiting. It's here to stay. Katie Arrington has made it very clear that the cybersecurity that's going to pertain to the 99.9% of people for CMMC is here and ready to go. So if you see those pieces online that this isn't something that's going to evolve so drastically, you're going to waste your time if you start today. And the auditors will be ready to go in late 2021. So don't wait to get started. Some people heard that November deadline and they thought, oh, I have so much time, I don't have to worry about it. No, you absolutely should get started. You're talking roughly 6 to 12 months before you could even think about getting an audit. So definitely do not wait to get started on your cyber compliance. And with that, I'm going to start with NIST. So NIST has been around for quite some time. It started in 2003, and there's been multiple revisions to it. But the one that most people are familiar with is the January 2017 issue. That was when people who had contracts with the NIST SP 800-171 received a letter saying, oh, by the way, you need to be compliant by December 2017. And what the clause really said was that you had to be compliant to all 110 requirements to win and continue to do work with the government if you work with CUI data. That's the key piece of the contract right there. And if you are the prime holder of that contract, you're responsible for your supply chain getting to compliance. So what does compliance really require? What does that mean? What is the 110 requirements? Well, the 110 requirements are laid out in different domains. And what you have to do is fill out these 3 pieces of documentation. The first one is a gap assessment. That just shows you where you're currently at today, what you guys are currently doing today. With a gap, the POAM was the next one, a plan of action and milestones. That is understanding where you're missing compliance on your gap assessment and what steps need to be taken in a certain timeline to fill those gaps. Then everything you are compliant to will go into your system security plan, and that's your final overview and execution of the policies. So all 3 of those pieces of documentation intertwined together. But the problem with NIST was that you had to self-attest to compliance. There was no formal certification process. There was no checks and balances from the government side to ensure that those things were being done. Yes, there were a handful of auditors that could come in and ask you questions, but for the most part, it was just self-attesting to compliance. So that was all due back in 2017. But what happened in late 2020 was this supplement that came out. And what they were doing with the supplement was understanding where the current marketplace was at with implementing their cybersecurity compliance. So what they did was they took the 110 requirements and they put them into a scoring metric. So some requirements were worth 3 points, 5 points, etc. And what happened is you had to start at a score of 110. And for every requirement that you were not compliant to, you would subtract those points. And that was how the government understood how many people were truly compliant. So the best score would be the 110, but you can go all the way down to a negative 203. So there was no right or wrong answer. The government just wanted to understand where you were in implementing all the 110 requirements of NIST. There were 3 assessment levels. So the basic was, hey, I'm a contractor, I am just doing a self-assessment, and this is my score. Then there's the medium and high assessments, which were completed by the government. What recently came out in a previous town hall with the CMMC accreditation body was that if you were audited on your NIST and you scored a 70 or higher, then your CMMC certification would be on only the remaining practices, the requirements and practices that you did not pass on during that NIST audit. So that is a really key component here when you're talking about transitioning from NIST to CMMC. It's very important that you take that information seriously and that you do your due diligence, because it could save you money when you go for your CMMC certification. And then these scores were to be documented in the supplier performance risk system, otherwise known as SPRS. And that needed to be done by November 30th of 2020. And if you put your score in there, you're self-attesting that, yes, I am at this current cybersecurity posture. And if you did get audited and there was a significant discrepancy between what you put into the system versus what the auditor finds, you potentially could face a False Claims Act violation. So why I bring that up is because it's important to make sure that your score is 100% accurate. If you're not sure if the implementation is good, if you're not sure that your documentation is there, definitely don't give yourself the points. It's better to go up in a score than not. And you can change your score as often as you like, and you can update it as frequently as you want. So there's no penalty if you start off at a low score and then slowly build your way up. So a couple things to look out for when it comes to NIST. Details are your friend. They save you time and money. What do I mean by that? The pieces with NIST is the 3 pieces of documentation. The more detail you have, the better, because you don't want an auditor to come in and start digging through all these pieces of documentation just to find you don't have enough information. A key example could say, oh, for this particular requirement, our chairperson reviews the information twice a year to confirm we're still compliant. Well, if you don't document who your chairperson is that a full, complete amount of documentation that is done? You also have to check that there are updates to the requirements. So the government does give a handful of updates as things progress, as new things happen. Most people are familiar with the SolarWinds hack, and there's the one with Microsoft. So I'm sure we'll see a handful of changes come out from the NIST and CMMC requirements and practices, but you need to make sure that you are up to date on all the changes that happen with NIST. If you do hire a consultant, or there is some piece of there's a company that you're working with to help you with cyber compliance, there's a couple things to keep in mind when you're putting together your gap assessment. Ask for a sample before you hire someone. And the reason why is because there's lots of companies out there, and I don't want to say too many companies, but there's definitely companies out there who are answering yes or no to the gap assessment questions. And why that technically does fulfill the requirement for the gap assessment, it doesn't help you as a small business. One of the questions for the gap assessment is, do you use passwords? Well, I hope the answer is yes, but a complete answer would be yes, we use passwords that are 15 characters long, that have a capital letter and a number and a special character, and it's updated every quarter, and we can't use the same one 10 times in a row. Like, that would be an accurate gap assessment. And this also helps you understand what deliverable you will be receiving at the end of that work that the contractor will do for you. The next piece for your plan of action and milestones, your dates need to be realistic. What a lot of people are doing now, particularly that the supplement came out and required a number to be put into the SPR system, is they're putting together this POAM. They're realizing that this is extremely expensive and they just don't have it in their funds. So they're putting these dates on these POAMs that, yeah, I'll get to that in 2 years. I'll get to that in 3 years, or whatever it may be. An auditor could come in and question why these dates are so far and so pushed out. So they need to be realistic. The other piece is that if you do change your POAM, that change needs to be documented. So you don't want to say, oh, next week I'll buy a new server and then not buy it next week. So when you're putting these dates together, make sure they're realistic and there's budgets and actionable steps behind what you're putting in your POAM. The next piece is your system security plan. So one of the key things is that people say, oh, it's an overview. Oh, it's an overview. Well, That is true. It's technically an overview, but it's really important to read the guidelines to ensure you're answering the information correctly. The government has put out thousands of pages of documentation about guidelines and what you should be looking for when you are documenting your compliance on this piece. And this actually happened recently to a client we're working with, and this particular one says, the NIST 3.1.3, that's the requirement we were working on. And the gap assessment says, control the flow of CUI in accordance with approved authorizations. So most people, when they read that requirement, they're thinking, oh, I use encrypted email, I'm good to go. That's all I need to refer to. But when you actually look at the guidelines, they're asking for way more information. The guidelines for NIST 3.1.3 has 5 different objectives. And the third one is talking about the designated sources and destinations, networks, individuals, devices. And then there's a couple examples on the bottom there. So what they're really trying to understand is, yes, you definitely use encrypted email, but can your people access social media on your VPN? Can your company just go to any website they want when you're on your VPN? Is there the possibility to, access all these different types of websites that might have spam or some type of way for an intruder to get into your network? So you need to establish the framework within your network and how it operates. So had you not read the guidelines for that particular requirement, you might have just said, yep, I read the question. It asked about the flow of CUI data. I use encrypted email. I'm good to go. But an auditor is going to read the guidelines. They're going to be looking at those pieces. So that's just a couple things to look at. But before we go to CMMC, are there any questions right now on NIST, or should we just keep going? Okay. So CMMC, what is CMMC? Well, it's a cybersecurity maturity model certification. The key word in that phrase is maturity. So it's understanding where you were, where you're at today, where you're going to be in the future, and building upon practices that help you remain secure. So you can see there's 5 levels, and each of these levels build upon each other. I'm sure most people have seen this graph. These practices come from the FAR, different versions of NIST, multiple different practices. And this is where the government has understood, not every contractor needs to be at all 110 requirements for NIST. We just need them to do the basics. We need them to do the simple things like my computer locks when I walk away from it and things of that nature. But level 3 is the one that really most people are paying attention to. And that one is it includes all 110 requirements of NIST, plus an additional 20 practices. So why I bring this up is because if you are taking your NIST extremely seriously, documenting it appropriately, executing on what you need to execute on, and making sure everything is taken care of, going for a level 3 certification is going to be significantly easier for you, particularly if you've already had a NIST audit where you got a score of 70 or higher. So it's really important to take NIST as the first piece of getting to CMMC certification if you have the NIST clause in your contract. Most people who are going for the level 3 CMMC have NIST in their current contracts today. And we'll talk more about that in the next couple slides. But to talk about the certification process, so the CMMC accreditation body put together a list of people who you can call for consultants. So there's a certified consultant, a non-certified consultant, but the actual certification comes from a C3PAO. And you have to get your certification paperwork from a C3PAO. You have to show you're certified before you can bid on new work. That's really, really important there. So if you're thinking, oh, I'm going to wait, I'm going to take my time with CMMC, I'll get to it eventually, you will not be able to bid if you do not have that documentation. The one key difference between NIST and CMMC is there is no plan of action and milestones. It's a pass or fail type of situation. So when you're looking through all of your pieces of NIST and then going towards your CMMC certification, anything that's currently in your plan of action and milestones today with NIST need to be executed for a certification. When you're looking at these contracts online, there's only a handful of them right now that have a CMMC built into it, and that information is listed in the RFI RFQ stage. So again, prior to bidding, you'll be able to see, oh, I need this level of certification to bid. And what's different about NIST versus CMMC as well is that NIST is for anyone who handles CUI data. So if you're a subcontractor who's providing a nut and a bolt for a ground vehicle, that's a nut and bolt that you can buy at any hardware store or whatnot, that's not CUI data. That's not controlled unclassified information. But if you are doing work with the government and you have a CMMC clause in there, they incorporate FCI data, which is information that you can read more about this online, but it's basically information that you wouldn't want posted in a readily, easily to read, accessible area, but you would have to go digging for it. So like a contracting officer's email, their telephone number, things that you would see typically on a RFQ or solicitation paperwork. So a couple things to look out for CMMC. Again, details are your friend. They save you time and money. The more details you can put down, the more information you can document, the easier audit's going to be. Auditors charge by the hour. So the more you can show them up front and they can read up front, the less they're going to have to ask you questions. Anyone who's been through an ISO audit, AS 9100 knows the pain of having to answer a billion questions on top of do your normal everyday job. They're estimating that a CMMC audit for a small company will take upwards of 200 hours. So don't spare any details when you're putting this information together for an auditor. Same thing, you have to check updates to the practices to ensure that you have the most current information. And we talked about this earlier, but Katie Arrington said levels 1 through 3 are set. If you're not familiar who Katie Arrington is, she's the one leading the charge from the government on the CMMC front. So she is the direct communication between the Undersecretary of Defense and the defense contracting team and industry. And she said that levels 1 through 3 are set. So do not wait to achieve compliance. Do not wait for hopefully something will change. Hopefully, the cost will go down. Hopefully this, hopefully that. This is going to happen, and this is going to come much quicker than most people anticipate. For CMMC, it is a 3-year certification process. And there's a couple things to think about it that you can use to your advantage. So if you are looking at your current system security plan for CMMC and you don't have everything you need to achieve a level 3 certification, which is what I would assume be targeting, you can still get certified in a smaller level. And why that's important is because it allows you to still play in the arena. It still allows you to be a defense contractor and bid on opportunities. So if you said, okay, I don't have everything done for level 3, but I have everything done for level 2, you can get certified to a level 2. And then in year 2, say, okay, I got everything executed for level 3. I'm good to go. I can get certified for that. You can get then certified for level 3. That certification process, going from level 2 to level 3, will only be on the delta of the practices. It will only be on what you recently got compliant to for a level 3 certification. So you're not going to have to go through everything you've already been certified to. You just need to get to that key piece of what I changed in my system security plan to get to the level 3. The one holdback, though, is that your level 3 status is only valid for the remaining 2 years. So if you got to compliant or certified in year 1 to a level 2, and then in year 2 you got certified to a level 3, your certification runs out at the end of year 3. So when the certification runs out, you can then go and say, okay, I'm going to be certified to a level 3 in year 1, and then that certification would be good for 3 years. Levels 4 and 5 are very, very rare. We're talking about less than 1% of the defense contractors in the United States will be pertained to levels 4 and 5. They are so rare that in our last town hall for the CMMC accreditation body, they said that potentially the government will just pay for defense contractors to be levels 4 and 5 because they understand it's extremely expensive. And if anyone wants to compete on those pieces, that it's going to be very difficult to get those companies to those types of compliance. So The changes to CMMC will most likely occur in the levels 4 and 5 area, but again, those are going to be very, very rare. And we talked about this earlier, but just to highlight again, if you are audited on NIST and you score a 70 or higher on that audit, CMMC certification will only be on the remaining practices. So it's something really to keep in mind. If you do get audited for NIST, it's not the end of the world. It's definitely an opportunity for your company to save money and save time and really get to the CMMC certification process way quicker than your peers. As of today, you cannot be certified. So if you're seeing posts on LinkedIn, social media, different websites, blogs, newsletters, there is absolutely no one out there today who can certify you for CMMC certification. The C3PAOs are not fully trained. They're estimating by the end of November of 21 that they will be good to go. If you want to verify anything about CMMC, all of that information is located on cmmcab.org. Their website shows everyone who has been certified through their programs. So if you're looking to hire a consultant and somebody says, yep, I'm this title and I was certified and I got this, paperwork and blah, 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 you can verify all of that on the cmmcab.org website. So just as a piece of information. So as a compare and contrast, NIST and CMMC, you can recoup the costs in your overhead and G&A for both NIST and CMMC. So as you guys are putting this together, definitely loop in your finance team, loop in anybody who can be able to expense those appropriately. With NIST, again, you have to self-attest to your compliance with CMMC. You need to be certified by a third party. With NIST, you have to be compliant to all 110 requirements, and yet the compliance look different. That could be, I'm not compliant today, I put that in my plan of action and milestones, versus I am compliant today, and you put in your SSP. As long as that requirement is documented in one of those two, you're technically compliant. Then, and of course, your score that you document in SPURS would reflect how many are executed today, but it's still something that is considered compliant if you document it in your POAM or your SSP. Your CMMC, you have to be compliant to different levels. So depending on what level you're trying to achieve, that will determine how many practices need to be executed today. Can't put it in a timeline, can't put it in a POAM, you have to get it done today. The NIST has that ability to be flexible with how to get to compliance and what timeline. With CMMC, it's pass or fail. There is no milestones that you need to achieve. There is no timeline that you can put in to eventually get to it and still get certified. You need to put your score, the DoD methodology score we talked about earlier, into the SPURS website every 3 years. So if on January 1st, you put your information in there, and then May 1st, you updated it, your 3-year timeline would start at that May 1st date. So just keep that in mind when you guys are putting your score in there. If you update it often, that last update is when the 3-year timeline starts. With CMMC, you need to be recertified every 3 years by a certified auditor. So that's a huge key piece, a key difference between the two. And then NIST affects any contractor with CUI data. So again, if you are the prime holder of that contract, you will most likely 99.9% of the time be seeing CUI data in that contract that has that clause in there. And if you pass that CUI data onto any of your subcontractors, it is your responsibility as the prime to make sure your subcontractors are compliant and they're doing what they need to do. So there is no way to claim ignorance. You need to make sure you're following up. Then with CMMC, it affects all contractors with CUI and FCI data. So by 2026, there will not be a single contract coming out of the government that does not have cybersecurity clauses in it. So if this is something where you think, oh, I can just only bid on something that doesn't have cyber compliance in it, or I'll redo my capabilities so I can bid on other things so I don't have to handle CUI data. By 2026, every contract will have this in it. So this isn't something that is avoidable long term. It has to happen eventually. So what's required today? So for NIST, we need your gap assessment, your plan of action milestones, and your system security plan. Once those three pieces are done, you calculate your score, calculate it accurately, and upload it into SPURS. That's what needs to happen today. If you do not have your score uploaded into SPURS, you cannot win any work. So if that's not in there, then that's it. With CMMC, you take your current plan of action milestones that you put together and close it out. Pull those timelines forward. Work with your finance team to reallocate the budget so you can get those pieces of equipment that you need. Work with your IT team to ensure that the double factor authentication that nobody wants to do is pushed forward so that you can get those pieces executed on the things you need to. Make sure your system security plan has a targeted level. Don't just shoot in the dark and say, oh, well, we're just going to keep going and get to compliance when we get to compliance. Make sure that the things that you're targeting are, one, pertainable to your level, and two, are organized in a way so that if by some chance you cannot get to compliance for the level you want, at least the previous levels are good to go. They are documented, they are filled out, and you can get a certification to that current level. So you're not waiting for auditors to come through eventually and get you certified. You want to be able to play in this space. You want to be competitive. You don't want your competitors who are out there getting work strictly because they got the piece of paper before you. Then once the auditors are certified, you hire the auditor and then you get the certification paperwork. So how do you know if this pertains to you? Well, these are a couple clauses to look for. So the first one is the 525-204-7012. That is the one that says you need to be compliant to NIST. So if you have a contract with that in there, you have to be compliant to NIST, and that is an absolute mandate. If you're a subcontractor and you do not know if NIST pertains to you, you have to contact your prime. You are responsible for doing that. Yes, the prime is responsible for ensuring you are compliant to NIST, but you as a sub need to do your due diligence as well. The 7019, that is the one that says you need to enter your score into SPURS. What's key about this is that after this supplement came out and the deadline hit for November 30th, the government issued a significant amount of contract amendments, including this particular clause. So if you have a contract with 7012, go into SAM, check and make sure that there's no amendments. And if there is amendments, if the 7019 is one of them, you need to get your score into SPURS today. Then the 7020, this is the one where you are signing off that the government can come in and audit you. This means a basic assessment is required, meaning that you as the contractor reviewed your information, you calculated your score, you put it into SPURS, but you're signing off that the government can at any time come in and audit your information. So just as a piece of information there. And again, I can't stress this enough. If you can score the 70 or higher, your CMMC certification is going to be way simpler, way less expensive because you're only looking at the delta of the practices. CMMC is 7021. That's the one that's saying CMMC is required for that contract you're bidding on. And the level 1 is the absolute minimum. And if there is a different level that's required for that contract, it will be stated in the proposal. So those 4 clauses are the ones that you should be working with your business development team, your engineering team, whatever team in your company that holds those particular contracts that can look at them simply and has readily access to them, then those are the clauses you should be looking for. And again, if you're a sub, you have to do your due diligence and make sure that the contracts you're working on, if they do have these clauses, what does that mean for you today? So next steps, check the contracts for clauses. So you can check in sections K, L, and M, in the T's and C's, or the CDRLs. Those are several locations where this information could be contained. Most people don't think the T's and C's or CDRLs would contain that information, particularly for NIST, but it definitely could be located there. So don't just do a simple search on the section K and check for that clause. You need to check all of those pieces. If you as a prime do have that contract, or you as a sub find out your prime has that in there, Do you even have CUI data? Are you readily accessing it to the team? Does the entire team have access to CUI data, or is it just the engineers and program managers? Because that's going to change how you set up your CMMC, or I'm sorry, set up your NIST system security plan. If you only have a small portion of your company that's accessing that information, you can set up your framework so only those people have to deal with the CUI and NIST requirements. And if you are the prime, making sure that your team does not have that, if your team does have access to CUI data, that they are doing what they need to do to be compliant. So a couple things to get around this is if you have a drawing with CUI data on it, and again, it will be clearly marked. There won't be any debates. When you're looking at this, if there is no CUI markings on it, then you're in the clear, but it will say CUI data on your drawings. If you do have it, and you're sending your information to a sub, is there a certain way you can send those drawings to your subs that does not show the CUI data? So if you're building a ground vehicle and the CUI data is, is everything except the hull, for example, can you take those drawings of the hull and send it specifically to the contractor who needs that information and not send them the entire drawing package? That's a very simple way to keep subs out of this process and ensure that they only see what they need to see. What are you guys currently doing for cybersecurity? So talk to your IT team, understand where you guys are doing today, because at the end of the day, you don't want hackers to come in and steal your information. You don't want them to access through your email intellectual property, because that costs money when you have to get that information back. So what are you guys currently doing today for cybersecurity? Talk to your IT team and leadership and get them involved. If you're the business development person, if you're the salesperson, if you're seeing this out in the market and you don't say something to your IT and leadership, it's going to be really uncomfortable when you guys are faced with, oh, now we have to go through all this work, get to compliance, and spend tons of money because we weren't doing what we were supposed to be doing the whole time before. Companies that got to compliance for NIST back in 2017 are having a way easier time with CMMC because they've already purchased what they needed to purchase. They've already built these costs into their pricing structures, and they're able to recoup what they're able to recoup. So work with your leadership and IT to get everyone on the same page. Talk to your partners in the industry, understand what they're doing, understand if there is something that they can do that's cost effective, or are they doing something with their primes that helps eliminate this access to CUI data. Go to webinars and town halls, talk to them and see what the latest topics are, what different types of programs are available. And if worst comes to worst, you can call me. I'm more than happy to give this presentation to your leadership, talk to your team, and help them understand what they should be looking at. I know lots of partners in the industry who can you can work with that are completely complimentary. The PTACs, they offer really great services. There's, the MEDCs, and there's so many free resources out there that can at least help you get started. Talk to people at Automation Alley. I'm sure they know people who they can set you up with. They're an excellent, excellent resource. So don't wait, call somebody, get somebody on your calendar to review this information. And again, here's my contact information. And what kind of questions do you have?
Question here. What does the CUI marking on the drawing look like?
It depends on what kind of drawing you're looking at. So if you Google CUI markings or look at the NIST websites, all that information is contained in there.
And just another one, what should a company expect in terms of how long it takes to get compliance?
So when you are starting from scratch, you have absolutely nothing documented. You're talking easily, not blinking an eye, 6 months. 6 months. So you, I imagine, would have to do a lot of do-it-yourself. So think about it. You're working a 40, 50-hour work week, doing your full-time job. Then you have to take 6 months and build NIST compliance into your time frame. So 6 months is a pretty reasonable expectation for how long it takes to get clients part-time. If you're hiring a consultant, if you're hiring somebody, they'll easily go a month or two just getting you to where you need to be. And that's them working full-time. So this is a very long timeline. This isn't something that you can just press a button and you're good to go. This is a lot of documentation. Large companies can take upwards of a year. And by large, I'm not talking like a General Dynamics or a BAE, like those guys, it's even more intense. But if you have lots of computers, if you have lots of semi-large engineering team of 5-10 people, like this is going to take a long time.
Okay, thank you for that answer. And another question would be, if a company doesn't have a primary contact, does cyber compliance pertain to them?
Yes.
Or prime
So if
contract, I'm
you,
sorry.
yes. So if you do have some contracts that as a sub, this will eventually pertain to you. Again, CMMC will be in full effect by 2026. So it might not pertain to you today because you don't handle CUI data. Then you need to start working towards your compliance. So this will eventually pertain to anybody. So definitely need to keep up on that.
You had mentioned that cyber compliance is not optional. If a company doesn't get to compliance, what options do they have?
You cannot do business with the government. That's the only option. This is something that the government is now mandating. You know, this is very similar with ISO. When ISO was around back in the day, everyone's like, oh, it doesn't pertain to me. Okay, you get this fancy certification and whatever, it's going to be fine. I don't have to do it. Now it's standard. If you don't have an ISO certification, you as a manufacturer are going to have a really tough time competing. So this is the exact same thing. It's just people are shocked because it came so fast. It's complicated because it's cyber and not everyone is a cyber expert. Technology is foreign to a lot of people. So it's hard to wrap your head around all these technical terms and technical requirements. So it's a little bit more shocking that way, but that is the only option. If you decide that you don't want to spend the money, you don't want to spend the time, the only space you can compete in is the commercial sector. And there is a lot of discussion on lots of forums and podcasts and things of that nature about CMMC expanding into the private sector because they understand the necessity of securing information. So credit card companies right now have a very specific set of requirements they have to follow. There's very intense discussion that they are just going to adopt NIST because NIST is so thorough. So that's just a piece of the puzzle with that. So if you don't want to do this cyber compliance, then you can't do business with the government. That's it. That's your only option.
Okay, thank you for that. If a company is small and with people wearing multiple hats, how are they expected to get compliant and manage compliance?
So there's a couple ways to go about it. One is you can talk to your resources that are available to you that are funded, by the state or memberships that you belong to. That's your first step, talking to people, understanding what they're currently doing. Then you can attend multiple webinars. There's lots of webinars that are documented on like websites like Prevail and things like that can show you basic things that you need to do or need to get started on. You can hire a consultant. You can hire them and say, hey, I need you to get me started. I need you to start on a gap, or I need you to do a gap in a poem and I can complete the SSP. But definitely start with the guidelines because the guidelines will help you understand where your capabilities lie. NUDG is a program management tool for a company to attain and maintain compliance. So if you have an IT team in-house and they understand the guidelines, NUDG is a very cost-effective measure to get you to compliance. So that's a key piece to do it too. But talking with your leadership and talking with your IT team to understand where they're currently sitting at. If you guys are looking at spending some money in a budget to update your building or get new computers or whatever it may be, talking to them now to help them understand what this all looks like can get you closer to CMMC or NIST compliance and getting that timeline pushed together. So with wearing the multiple hats, it's very, very difficult. But the first thing you got to do is put a meeting on the calendar. And sometimes it's calling somebody you trust in the industry to talk them through. Again, calling me, I'm more than happy just to talk to you about what you guys should be looking at. And when it comes to the multiple hats, if you need to hire someone, on your team to do CMMC or NIST compliance. And then they can also do other pieces of technology in your company, then sometimes that's just the most cost-effective way to do it. Some people just give this to their managed service provider that they hire and say, deal with it. But some managed service providers don't offer that service. There are several people that I work with on a consulting basis and say, hey, this company needs 20 hours of support. Can you give them 20 hours of support? So that's a really simple way to reduce costs without having to add more hats to your particular plate. So there's multiple ways to go about it. But the thing is, the bottom line is this has to be done. So look at your team, look at what people can do, put a list together, get people on the calendar, start talking to people, and get a timeline put together. That's the only thing you can do.
Perfect. Thank you for that as well. Just the last question here is, for CMMC audits, how should a small business build that into their roadmap and budget?
So look at where you're currently at today. Ensure that the information that you have is 100% accurate. So what I mean by that is, if you put your POAM and your SSP in front of you, make sure that you're looking at it correctly. We talked about earlier with the guidelines. Did you cross-reference your SSP or system security plan with the guidelines? So make sure that what you have is 100% accurate. 2, look at your gaps. Understand where you're at today versus where you need to be, and look at those timelines to ensure that they're accurate in what you need to be. When you are looking at your contracts today, if they do have the NIST contract or the NIST clause in it, chances are that means you're going to be a level 3, most likely. Can't say for 100% certainty. So understand where you're at today, what you need to do to get to level 3, and slowly just start ticking them away one at a time. And it could be hey, this week, this is the 1 requirement I'm working on, or this is the 5 requirements my team is working on. And slowly but surely, you're going to get to compliance, and save the hard ones for last. I talk to a lot of people in the marketplace who just do not have double factor authentication on their systems, because let's be honest, it's not fun when you have to type in your password 2 times, you got multiple passwords, or you're trying to access something on your phone and you have to put that number in. It's definitely cumbersome. So that's usually the last one people want to get executed. And that's okay. That's okay. If that's the last requirement you need to do to get to compliance, that's fine. Just understand that this roadmap is a long-term roadmap. Once you get to compliance, now you need to maintain it long-term. So if you look at the November timeline of an auditor getting ready to go, that should be your deadline. If I should be 100% ready to go by November 2021. So when these auditors start coming into the marketplace, I can call one and get them on my calendar.
Perfect. And that was actually the last question. So I just want to say thank you to Veronica, and thank you to our viewers for watching today. We hope that you tune in for our next Tech Takeover, April 21st. The Tech Takeover will be on Enterprise Augmented Reality, Unlocking Human Potential by Connecting People and Process with Light Guide Systems. And just a reminder that this event and all of our Tech Takeovers are archived on our website for your viewing later. Thank you to everyone, and have a great rest of your day today.
Thank you, everybody.